Good evening, everyone. We are very happy that you remained with us until the last day of our festival. We have this evening a special discussion following the screening of the Push documentary. The topic of this discussion is the housing crisis between human right and profit. And we have this evening with us Fredrik Gertten. He is the director of Push, the documentary that we have just screened. We also have Irina Zamfirescu. She is an activist for human rights and she works for Active Watch. Her PhD research focused on social housing. And we also have Bogdan Iancu. He's an anthropologist working at the National School for Political Sciences and Administration. He obtained his PhD in ethnology and anthropology in 2011 from the University of Perugia. Why are we doing a special screening of Push in a green documentary festival like Pelican? Maybe you are wondering. Because we think that the process depicted by the documentary is intimately connected to the urban environment, and this process leaves dramatic changes in how people use the urban space. I would like to start by congratulating you, Fredrik Gertten, and your entire team for Push, and thank you everyone for joining us. Push shows that today is no longer accurate to talk about gentrification and the violation of housing rights resulting from urban renewal processes, and that we need a new language to describe what is happening. I wonder if you were aware of the breadth of the phenomenon when you started making this documentary. Were you aware of this need to find a new language to discuss this process, or it was something that appeared?
No, that need, I think, was one of the reasons I wanted to make the film. Because, you know, I also live here in Malmö, in the neighborhood with a lot of immigrants and, you know, like very lively neighborhood. And I was also being active here with my neighbors and so on. So I've always heard this word gentrification. And then when you talk about gentrification, you also talk about the gentrifier. And then the gentrifier sometimes is some young people with beards that open up a coffee shop, or somebody opens up an art gallery, and suddenly they are the bad guys, you know. And I always felt that that's really stupid. It's a very shallow analysis of things, and it's also creating a divide. So I think when people are doing cool stuff in the neighborhood, they want to make it safer, they want to make something for the children, they want to make it greener, you know, they want the bike lane. That's good things, and sometimes when the values created by neighbors in a community, sometimes big money comes in and violates and like take advantage of the values created by the community, and that's not gentrification. That's something else. So, and then I mean, we from the film, you know, we talk about financialization, we talk about commodification, and that's probably much more what it is. It's like it's people with too much money, or companies with too much money. They want to park their money, or they want to grow their money, and they found out that you can do that even in a poor neighborhood.
Thank you so much for this very sharp beginning of our discussion. I would like to remind our audience that you can participate in this discussion actually, and you can leave your questions under the live streaming on Facebook and in the chat box on the dedicated website where you saw the documentary. I hope we have as many as possible. Before we get a bit to move this discussion to the European or Romanian context, I would like to ask any of you, Bogdan or Irina, if you would like to explain us in a couple of sentences what financialization and commodification means, maybe for the audience that do not necessarily have a social sciences background. And you can complete each other. We are very informal with the structure of the discussion.
I will try. A bit of examples. So what's happening, and this is an intense phenomenon, at least in the big cities in Romania, is that we tend to see housing as a good that can be bought, mainly. This is the simplest way to put it. This is not something among citizens, but it's something that it's built through public policies within a country. So I would give you an example because it's something that is happening nowadays in Romania. It's the program First House. So probably most of the Romanian people know about it. The program now is constructed so that it enhances the values of the value of the home, and what is more, mainly you can look at this program as the state taking care of the company that is building the home and not the person that should buy the home. So all these politics that have been promoted largely in Romania, both at central level and local level, is building an image that the state's main concern is for the idea of the property and not the idea of the people who is going to move in that property. The idea of the house as a product, because mainly this is the discussion about, is the lack of the social component of this housing phenomenon in Romania. So what we see now, and we have been seeing all the way from the 90s, is that the state has no responsibility in what concerns supporting the urban poor, the people that cannot afford. And it is important to say this, it's not the people that do not have a wage. So these are people that are working, but their wages are so low, or their pensions or their income is so low that they cannot afford to live in the cities in which they were born. And the state does nothing to support these people. The state is mainly focused on the economic part of the housing. So in my view, this is what's happening in Romania, and it has been happening since the 90s.
Can I add something here?
Please do.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know so much about Romania, but I think overall what we've been seeing, and this is what Joseph Stiglitz talks about, is the deregulation, the neoliberalism that started in Chile and then what was copied over and over and over again. That kind of policy has been really important in the European Union. So many countries have been kind of almost forced to open up their housing markets from the older models. And after the 2008 crisis, when a lot of countries needed support, they were forced to open up their housing markets. So Portugal, Cyprus, Malta, many other countries were forced to make it easier for money to enter into the housing sector. So it's been, the politicians have been lobbied strongly by the industry, and they have been really successful. And which now means that governments in most countries, including my own, has lost their influence they had before. So it's a very, and this is like overall in Europe, we see this. So it's not unique for Romania, even if I'm sure you have your own traditions.
We in Romania have politicians that are involved into the housing market. So they are players while they do the regulations.
That's even more complicated. But I mean, but normally with a lobby, I mean, you should follow the money also in the lobby of the politics, because they are changing the regulations and the politics.
But in Romania, we are like in backwardness, because we don't have the problem of a huge problem of financialization of housing, but we are in the epoch of gentrification. So we still have this problem, and the problem of financialization of housing. It's only on, I think it's part of Cluj, which is like a Silicon Valley, Romanian Silicon Valley. So, but the landscape, it's very different. On the same time, the commentary recalled the problem of urban area, if you want. So in Bucharest, we have this problem. The new buildings going in the middle of nowhere, destroying the green areas, the green and rural areas, connecting the buildings to the lakes, and having a lot of problem with the infrastructure. And so we have an environmental problem, and not very a problem of huge evictions like we see on the documentary. But we have in Bucharest and in Cluj 2 or 3 interventions like this, but I think they are not very connected with the phenomenon of finance.
I mean, I haven't been to Romania for this, so I don't know your local situation, but if you look around in countries in Europe or around the world, people tell me we don't have the problem like you do now. And then 2 years later, it has already happened, you know? So, I mean, So you look around, if you go to the Czech Republic, you go to other countries, you see Blackstone Blackstone bought 40,000 apartments in the coal miners area outside of Prague. I mean, so these companies are around. I don't know if they're present in Romania, but you should check it up.
Because in Romania, we have a very particular problem, if you want. It's in the 90s, the state privatized all the buildings of the housing of the state. So basically, we are in the position of having 19% of people are the owner of their house. But this is a problem, and I think Irina could avoid to explain why this is a problem, because we don't have social housing in Romania.
Yes, I think it is important to discuss a bit if we have witnessed any systemic transformations in the pattern of land and housing ownership in Romania over the last decades, because we see this kind of process in many other Eastern European countries, whereas the documentary mostly focuses on big metropolis, on London, on big cities, where of course there are other historical processes at place. But I'm very happy that Fredrik showed us that this is a global process, and in Romania we have only a local unfolding part of a bigger process. So maybe if we discuss a bit about these systemic transformations in the pattern of ownership, we could understand better how we got to this point.
I would argue against what Bogdan said just a little bit. I think in Romania what we are witnessing is that the local authorities is the biggest gentrifier now in the cities of Romania. So they are not directly buying properties, of course, that wouldn't be gentrifying because it's the public authority. But what they are doing is that they are allowing big building projects in the city, absolutely with no rules. Actually, in Bucharest, the capital of Romania, we do not have an urbanistic general plan that should say this is for housing, this is for companies, this is for. So everybody is building chaotically now in Bucharest. What is more, Cluj, because Bogdan mentioned this, the whole country is now looking at what is called the first smart city in Romania. Everybody is absolutely fascinating about this street that has plugs and things like that. What is fundamentally lacking now in Romania is the discussion about the social impact of these projects in the cities. We have, for example, if a private company has a project, a building project, you have to have that environmental impact study. Officially, you have it. it's done wrongfully a lot of times, but you do have this concern, what kind of impact does that project has on the environment? You do not have this discussion on the social impact of a project. So nobody is talking about what is going to happen with this area if we are going to build here a residential project. What we are seeing now in Bucharest in District 3, for example, where the project is focused on this, making the space more beautiful, making to enrich the green areas of the city. Everything is cleaner, is nicer. We are building a new housing through these private companies, but everybody forgets to talk about this. I think it's an important part of the citizens of Bucharest, the urban poor, because again, this is an expensive city, but nobody is talking about them. What I think it's a confrontation between the private interest, which is companies that are building this project. And here, of course, I have my own feelings about these companies, but I always have these premises in my head that their mainly aim is profit. My expectation, exactly as in the documentary, is for the public authority to have this control over the public interest of the companies and to represent the citizens of the city. This is something that we lack in Romania. So I've never heard, and I'm a person that I'm listening tens of hours of discussion within the city hall of Bucharest, but I have never heard the mayor taking the part of the citizens in what concerns a major urbanistic program. So we are always having this discussion about progress, about making the city more beautiful, more functional, more green, more. But I have never heard the discussion about making more accessible for the urban poor. And it's not mainly the poor, because here the minimum wage, it's kind of the cost of a rent for a one-room apartment at the outskirts of the city. But we do not have this discussion here, unfortunately. This is my main concern when it comes to gentrifying. It's because of the public authorities that this is happening in Romania.
But I mean, I've been with the film in Belgrade, for example, several. I mean, and they have the same problems of these kind of big projects that are landing in. So you have to look to who are these guys coming in? Who are the guys building all these? Normally, they are also part of a financialized system, because many of these projects are real estate investment trusts. So it's also money floating in from a lot of different directions, and you have to follow that money. Who are these actors, and how are they impacting your city? And projects like that are always sold with a word development, or progress, or it's like they have the language for it, but it's basically a money game. So you have this investment trust that creates this project and build it, and in the process they are selling out spaces to Starbucks or whatever, some chains, or maybe sometimes it's luxury apartments that sometimes are standing empty. So as I haven't been to your city, but I mean, this is what we see everywhere. So I think it's a little bit hard for me to take part of this discussion. I would love to I could have a few days to walk around in Bucharest and to see, because I think it's really important that you don't stay local. You have to look for the global tendencies in your own city, because that's the whole point of making my film. And I haven't been to one city in the world, and I've been to all continents with this film, where people haven't seen, where you can't see the global game in your own town. So it's of course, every country has their own history, their own traditions, their own corrupt people, whatever. I mean, you can also talk about the corrupt money. Saviano talks about. So what is the influx of the corrupt money in your city? What role do the corrupt money play? for example, in pushing up the values of housing, because they're all interested in pushing up the price of a house, which is then killing off the local business, but it's also pushing people out of town.
Mm-hmm. Actually, the discussion we propose is about the local landscape of financial market, if you want. Because, for example, here we have a interesting point. For example, in Bucharest, you can see that the huge developers talks about the first issues is talking about the credit. So they can give you the credit to have the to have the house. And I think this is the meeting between the financialization of housing and the aspirations of the middle class subjects in Bucharest. And this is very interesting. You can see the power of of this tool when you see that you can have the credit for the mortgage directly from the real estate developer.
A very important aspect, if I can add, of your documentary is, I mean, part of this speculative capitalism is the fact that these flats remain empty. Most of them are vacant. And this creates sort of a deurbanized city center or deurbanized neighborhoods. Was this something that you witnessed only in major cities, or you think that this process is happening also in medium scale cities?
It happens everywhere. It's also part of the financial game show, is that and that's why, you know, of all the criminal money, of all the tax haven money, it's like 90% goes towards real estate, and a lot of it goes towards housing. And because it's a very good place to hide away money and to launder money, of course. And the empty house is when you enter into, we have this house in London where you see it's like the squatters had taken. It's kind of a rundown house, not very big, but bought for like 20 million pounds, you know, totally overpriced already 10 years ago. But why can you sit on that house? Because with that house, you go to the bank and say, I need some money from some other business, and I have an asset. So they're playing with the assets. You know, that's the story. So you want to have all these assets, and you don't really care if there's people living in it. Actually, if you have people living in the house, in most countries, a tenant comes with some kind of rights. So it's better not to have them there, because it's only fuss to have tenants in the house. This is something we can see in many countries, and also in these new real estate trust, the REITs, condos shooting up everywhere. It's a story from all over Europe and the world about the dark towers. Dark towers, you can hear it from cities around Germany, or, you know, also from Prague, or from, you know, or Southeast Asia and so on. I would be surprised if you don't see it in your country. You know, it's a good way to park money, and there is a lot of money out now. And it's also important to understand that these assets are a part of a financial game. It's like a mark in the casino. So all these companies, Blackstones and so on, they don't really care about the content of their investments. It's all about the asset and the asset's possibility to grow. And you can even put out the asset on some other kind of speculative market where people can speculate if this asset are going up or down. You can put in your yacht there. You can put in anything, you know. And with that yacht, you can create more money. It's a complicated, very smart system. And you know, a company like the private equity funds like Blackstone, it's like the new kid on the block of global capitalism. They are behaving in a way we haven't seen before. So sometimes we think it's just a company, but it's something else. It's not the bank, it's something else. And they are so extremely powerful now. I mean, Blackstone are sitting on assets worth $600 billion dollars. It's like it's so much, so we can't even imagine how much it is. It's like it's extreme. We are still talking about them as they were like banks. And go back to Saskia. She says this is an extractive sector. They're sucking out values of society, of companies. And I think that's my recommendation to anybody who is watching the film. Start to map your own city. Who are the owners? Who are the new people coming in? Who are building these houses? There's always something else behind if you want to understand what's going on. Because it can also, I mean, it can go extremely quick. Barcelona, the rents went up during 5 years, 50%. Now, boom. They thought it was like, it goes totally out of control. The same in Lisbon. It's a very hungry machine. It's also because capitalism is, creative in one way, but it's like, this is also, everybody's copying the other. So when now the big guys are showing, this is the model, everybody rushed to do the same.
And what you are please.
No, so they will pick house after house, or business after business, because they don't really care about if it's a home or it's a business or, right now in my town here, Blackstone bought 10% of an oat milk company called Oatly. And they were like, it's like a very sustainable company and so on, but boom, they go everywhere. And then they stay for 4 or 5 years and then they sell it, They're only interested in, the profits they can squeeze out for a short time.
What you are explaining now, Fredrik, is very similar with what happens in land grabbing and with the massive speculations with agricultural land that is kept idle only to increase the value, or with forest grabbing for conservation purposes and so on. I would like to ask Bogdan or Irina, how big of a threat do you think this major corporate acquisition in Romanian cities present now? Is it a big threat? Or we are not there yet?
I think we have a fragmented landscape. So we have the small fishes, like mafia in Italy, like Saviano explained, and it was brilliant. This explanation of connection, the small or the huge business of mafia in order to wash the money. For example, in these neighborhoods, working class neighborhoods in Bucharest, we have this process of biscuits blocks for middle class subjects, but on the same time without a building for persons, but for the future. And on the same time, we have let's say 8 or 9 huge developers producing over the night huge buildings, and sometimes they're empty buildings. But I think we still don't have this dimension of the problem we can see on the movie. But on the same time, we have some problems because of gentrification. And I agree with Irina that the state, and here is the problem, the state, the Romanian state, it's the partner of the business and not a partner of the citizens. And I think another problem is that this problem, the problem of prima casa, the first house, which was designed as a social, or a claim to be a social tool to help people without financial possibilities. And finally, it was a tool for banks in order to connect middle-class aspiration with the mortgaged. So I think we don't have this dimension of black towers and this phenomenon, but on the same time we have a Romanian declination of this type of relation between capital and finance and aspirations.
I think it's quite interesting that you mentioned land grabbing.
Yeah.
Because land grabbing, I would say that a lot of things that is happening right now with this commodification or financialization of housing is exactly the same thing as land grabbing.
Absolutely.
It's actually land grabbing of urban land. So it's a much better word to use than gentrification, because
it's
like
true.
a very sloppy, confusing way of talking. I mean, it's been on for a long time, but it doesn't really describe what's going on.
Mm-hmm. This is true.
Gentrification can also be, in some neighborhoods, it can be a good thing even, you know.
Yeah.
So but land grabbing is made always in the interest of somebody who wants to park money and grow money. And it's there, and almost all the time that money is coming from somewhere else, you know. So it's not even, very rarely it's local money. There's always a local facilitator who might buy it first and then sell it on. But all these big money are looking for assets to park. So that can be land in Africa or land in Romania or a gold mine somewhere, or, you know, or poor people's homes. The same thing, the same players, basically, the same players. I mean, Blackstone, which we talked about in the film, they are big in the agro business also. They're big in Brazil. They are building the soya port in Brazil, where they're exporting soya to China so they can feed the pigs and the chickens in China. So they're totally part of that game too.
Thank you so much for bringing this into the discussion. And I think it's important to notice that this acquisition is not only the acquisition of underutilized or former industrial land for site development. Mostly buildings that are proper for living are grabbed for new investment and you know, to enter this financial cycle. I would like to ask maybe Irina if she wants to comment on this risk of having large acquisition in Bucharest, for example, because I know that you have done many years of research, so you have a first-hand knowledge of what is happening on the real estate market.
One thing that I think it helps a lot, this phenomenon, is the fact that we do not have data on this. So if you are to look into the National Strategy for Housing, which is not a document that the government officially said that it would be implemented, so it's just another document, well written, and that's it. But they are taking their official statistics on the market house from a website that it's a commercial website, imobiliare.ro, which is a private website. So they are taking official data from those people. We are lacking this information, and of course this is only of help for this phenomenon. Nobody's watching it. What I can observe, because again, this is something that you can do it only by monitoring the activity within the city hall activity, because otherwise you do not have centralized data on this. But I can tell you that there is in the last 4 years, it has been a lot of construction of offices building. This is something that I think has increased a lot in the last years in Bucharest, at least. And again, for the Romanian audience, sorry for this, for the people in Bucharest mainly, Buzești is a street that we have witnessed in between 2010 and 2014. Appreciatively, I think 100 historical buildings were demolished there. And what we are seeing now is that they are building offices buildings with Starbucks at the ground floor. And again, that was an area extremely historical. Those were people that had little stores from their grandparents. This is absolutely destroyed. So this is something that I think it's obvious that we have this kind of phenomenon, but I don't know if it's on the residential part of it for building houses for the people, but mainly what I'm seeing is they are doing this through office buildings, which again, a lot of them are still empty, despite the fact that they have been built for 4 years, 5 years now. They are empty now. And another thing that I think Romania is, as Bogdan said earlier, we have the highest rate of private property here. We do not have rights for the people who rent the houses, because we have an extremely black rental market house in Romania. So it's really hard to monitor and to see how much of this residential part of the new buildings is being they rent these buildings. Actually, they do it to sell it immediately. I think less than 3 new residential projects has been, before being sold, put out for rent. So people are not into renting. These big companies are not into renting their properties. Actually, they are just directly sell them. In Bucharest is waiting for the historical buildings to just collapse and build their tall buildings. But again, what I'm saying is that they are kind of quickly being occupied. So for the residential part of the new buildings, I tend to say that we do not have such an intense phenomenon of just keeping them empty. But for office, this is something that I think it happens quite often here.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned Starbucks, because Starbucks are not only selling coffee, they're making more money from real estate than they do from coffee. And they're also very often a part of new projects. And so you can also see that if Starbucks is opening up, it's also part of some kind of financialized activity in your town. Check around who is owning the houses that Starbucks are sitting on. They have the restaurants in. You will probably find something, a new story also. I think it's worth looking into.
We have a question from the audience for Fredrik. In the documentary, somebody says that Blackstone will crash. Is that possible, and how? Is it possible for such a giant to crash, or they are too big to fail? Because we heard this story many times in the last financial crisis of 2008.
Yeah, Blackstone is the biggest private equity company on the planet, and they've been growing after every crisis we've had in the global economy. They started in the 80s, but they've been, for every time there's been a major crisis, they've been growing. This is a moment they love right now, the COVID crisis. Mm-hmm. It's an opportunity to them to go out and shop more. The president of Blackstone went out and said, we are sitting on 150 billion of dry powder, 150 billion US dollars, dry powder, money ready to put into the market. So they're growing. What is happening is that these kind of business models, you already mentioned that the salaries in Romania hasn't gone up. So people are making the same amount of money, and the cost of living, housing, food, everything gets more and more expensive. And I think there is a breaking somewhere out, and you can see it in Chile. I've been with the film in Chile. People are on the streets because the model has gone too far. Right now in the US, people are on the streets. Well, is this all about police violence? In the financial crisis, 13 million Americans were sitting in homes that were caught by the banks. And a lot of these people lost their homes. It's 80% of them was Black Americans and Latinos, Afro-Americans and Latinos. So the people on the streets have lost already a lot. And I think if you can move that also to Beirut or to Baghdad or to Hong Kong, I mean, you can see that people are extremely frustrated, and it takes a lot of other stupid directions, because we also have xenophobia, we have populist movements. So that's also another part of it, that people are losing a lot, and very few are winning, and the winners are quite often linked to organized crime, or to cheating, not paying taxes. You know, it's like and I see citizens are extremely frustrated. So that's, I mean, the model is breaking in that way. But of course, I don't know if Blackstone will go down or not. I think we need is more politics. We need more regulations. They hate regulations, so we must love them. I think that's my message.
Thank you so much, Fredrik, for bringing this point. Yes, Irina, please.
If I can add a little thing, here in Romania, we lack something that is essential in my view. We do not have this remote thought that housing is a right. What we have in Romania is that most of the Romanians consider that housing is a merit. So this is something that, in my view, it's a very big problem, and this is something that, as an activist for human rights and for the right to housing, this is my main problem, that people still consider that people should deserve a home, then they do not consider it a human right. So I don't think that we are not even remotely close to the moment that we will see people that are rioting against the fact that the rents are this high. This is one of the biggest problems here in Romania.
Maybe not, I don't know anything about it, but I don't think you should see the human right of a home as a problem. It's a possibility, because what we've seen when the film now has been playing in many countries, it's been playing a lot in Germany, you know, in many countries, I can see that the language, Leilani's language in the film, is actually now entering more and more into the activist groups and to the politicians. The message from the industry and the lobbyists has been housing market housing. It's been all the time, housing is a market. But if this is a language war, you can actually use housing as a human right, and it is a universal human right that also the government of Romania has signed into. So there is an obligation, there is an international law that says that Romania has to take care of the citizen and give them this human right. So yeah, I think it's a good something you can actually use in. And I think the audience out there, you should start to use that much more, the human rights of a home.
But the problem in Romania is that the middle class is very connected with this gospel of merit, you know. And after the socialism, the problem was that we had a lot of anti-communism, anti-socialism, that brings the idea that having a house is not a right. And it's a material aspiration of being connected with a good job in the corporation, and not to having this right to.
Yes, they have been very successful in telling that story.
Yeah, actually.
Yes.
And now it's your job to turn that storytelling around. And I think this is the moment.
Create a crisis.
Turn the storytelling around. And I can see that happening in country after country, where they actually use this language, and then something happens.
I think that one of the ways to solve this conundrum is to look who are the groups that are excluded from home ownership. And if we identify these groups in Romania, or at least if we understand their condition and their predicament, we will see that they are disenfranchised and they lack other rights as well, not only the lack of housing. Most of them are groups that do not belong to the majoritarian ethnicity, or maybe they have been excluded from other realms of the society. And I would like to ask Bogdan or Irina if they want to reflect a bit on who are the groups that are most suffering from this escalating price of modest housing in the Romanian cities.
We should have this information in mind when we discuss about this, that more than 40% of Romanians live in some kind of poverty, which is a lot, 40. The problem is that they do not have a voice. They do not know their rights. They are not. They do not organize. It's something that we cannot do, having the internet and all that things. So they have no voice. This is the main problem for them, because if we talk about it's a minority, but still there are a lot of people here in 40%. What is more, I think that people with middle income are people who cannot access a home right now. They cannot buy it with a middle income, not a minimum wage. But again, as Bogdan said, I think we should, it's really hard with them, because these are the people that unfortunately frown upon the 40% of the people that are extremely poor. So they do not want to mix with those people. So we have in Romania a lot of hate against the poors of the country. Unfortunately, in my view, this is one of the biggest problems, that we cannot solve the poverty because the non-poor hates the poor. But we cannot gather in the same group, unfortunately. My concern as of course, human rights activist is to give a voice somehow, to help, to support the extremely poor people that do not have the incomes to pay miserable rents at the outskirts of the city. So for me, these are different problems. So a person who cannot afford to buy a home, it's different from a person who cannot afford to pay a rent. And for me, it's really important, firstly, to support the person that cannot afford to pay a decent a roof over their head. And I don't think I am into organizing the middle income people that cannot afford to buy a home. I think social housing lacks completely in Romania, and my concern now is to solve this urgent matter, which is housing for the extreme poor in Romania.
I tell you, I'm watching out from my window here, and I can see maybe, I will see at least 20 Romanians in my square, and they're all sleeping outside. Actually, ironically, they are the only ones flying into Sweden now during the COVID crisis. They can't go by land, so they fly in with Wizz Air from Cluj and Bucharest, and it actually makes sense to sleep in the street and beg here, even during the COVID crisis. So we know that you have a social problems in Romania. We see it every day, and we talk to them every day. And it's new groups coming in. They don't bring their kids, so they're coming and going. But we know.
But I think that, the social housing, if it will be resolved in Romania, it will be a problem for the market. So I think it's another way for the state to help the finance. This is my point. I think it's not a side effect, or it's not. I think it's a project. The problem of social housing, it's a project.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can't enter into that debate. It's a local.
Maybe we will move to another question. I have a last question from Fredrik from the audience. Someone is asking you, do you think people will leave the cities and move to the countryside in the post-corona age? Maybe a new green movement? And I would add, do you think Blackstone will go into the countryside as well?
It's highly possible that some people will move out and work digitally from other parts of town if you have a job, But I mean, the only place where people can get an affordable home in many countries is a place where there is no jobs, no schools, no service, no nothing, So it's no communication basically. So and this is a global phenomenon. So it's wherever there is. So these kind of the market's price is going up. It's, I mean, if I look around in the south of Sweden, you can just follow the train lines out, and the prices are going up everywhere. So it's also in small towns. So it's exactly the same things happen. And Blackstone is here also buying in smaller towns. So not only in big cities at all. And they're buying the homes where the most vulnerable people live, the immigrants and so on, the people where there is an affordable housing, they for them it's really interesting. So I'm not sure, and Blackstone are everywhere. So they are not only in this, they'll go for elderly home, they go for students home. It's really interesting for them. But what I heard also in the US, they're also buying trailer parks. So it's wherever there is money to make. So, but I mean, my film is not about cities per se, you know, it's about understanding this machine that is trying to make profits of our basic needs. And we need to fight back. And I think we fight back through knowledge and language to also to understand how they operate. And I think you should try and map your own city, look into your own city, who are the players, how are they doing this? Because you will see this is a part of a global game.
Which do you think are the main alternatives for political action available to people affected by this process? I mean, we have depicted in your documentary activism and political engagement at a high level, for example, UN. But on the other hand, what you are doing with the documentary can also be a tool of political action, right? Do you think the role of arts and these kind of productions will increase in the future regarding this aspect?
Yeah, I think, you know, sometimes I'm in this talk, I talked about the lobby forces. The people with the most money, they invest enormous amounts of money into storytelling. You know, the explanation models of why we need to do it in this way and not that way. And so Blackstone, they are big supporters of Donald Trump, and they are active in lobbying against legislation and so on. So what we need to do is to fight their explanation models. And I think my film Push is a part of fighting an explanation model that says the market will solve everything. No, the market is not solving everything, because there's a lot of people sleeping in the streets. So the market is not delivering. And there is, you know, in London, not even a young doctor can rent a house. You know, so in many cities, it's so extreme. So also people who are traditionally doing really fine, they can't be part of it, you know. In Amsterdam, the city of Amsterdam, the teachers can't live there. It's extreme in many cities that, you know, professionals, well-trained professionals are also losing out. You talk a lot about that the middle class in Romania have a different mindset, but sooner or later, or maybe already now, they will be the victims. And of course they will do better than the Roma people sleeping in the streets, but still they feel the stress. And if they're sitting well now, their kids will feel the stress. So and this is what's happening. So these films, I mean, I'm happy I've been with audiences in so many countries, and the film has been, I mean, the city departments, you should, I mean, the architects should see it, the film, you should use the film to invite politicians, invite mayors and city planners to talk about this. This is happening all over the world. Many mayors have seen the film, many city planners, many architects, and many students and so on. So please use the film.
And we are so grateful for you to offer this film. Please, Bogdan, continue.
You know, it's very sad that in our district, in the first district of Bucharest, the urban planning was designed by a private company, and not and they designed the plan to develop the district as you can imagine. So the first fight to do for us is to fight against this type of project, you know, that the design of.
But it's the same model, because that's what we talk about in the film. It's the model created in Chile with Milton Friedman. It's a deregulation. It's the privatization of everything. If you use the film, or if you talk about this, so people actually understand that there's a pattern here, and the way of fighting is that the politics is taking back the control of things. The city planning process should be a democratic process, and you should have the citizens in the center of those plans. But I mean, in Eastern Europe, you're suffering a bit more of the neoliberalism than the rest of Europe, because it was a love affair in the beginning for a lot of people, I understand. But now it's like it's 30 years since '89, you know. So maybe it's time also in Romania to look into what was the price of all this deregulation. What is the cost? And you can see the cost if you have 40% in extreme poverty. That's a lot.
Definitely, we still have lots of struggles to fight, but I think we will wrap up, and I would like to thank very much Fredrik Gertten for bringing this movie to Pelicam. I hope that the discussion we had also with Bogdan Iancu and Irina Zamfirescu, and that will remain on the Facebook page, will still draw some audience, and we will continue this discussion. We hope to see all of you at the next editions in Tulcea, in the heart of the Danube Delta.
Can I add one final thing?
Please do.
When I was sitting here, I got a text from Leilani Farah, so she sends her love to all of you. And she's in Canada. She hasn't been able to leave at all. But Leilani and I have also started a podcast, which are called Pushback Talks. So we released right now. So we have 3 episodes out, and I think it can be useful. And listen to it and give us, send us feedback. You can always find us on Twitter, Fredrik Gertten or Leilani Farah, and please keep talking to us. I think by keep talking about these things, we can also move ourselves out of the shade of pessimism, because we don't need that. We need to be optimists and believe that we actually can make change.
Because it's a common struggle.
Yeah.
Thank you once again for being with us. Thank you so much, Bogdan. Thank you, Irina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.